The lesson.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk Lyrical Commission. Because so you dropped your first EP in 98, second EP in 99.
99, 2000, yeah.
And then Lyrical Commission stage you set was 2002?
Yep.
So
yeah,
tell us...
very end, December 2002.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, I guess tell us how you met all the members of Lyrical Commission and then how you guys decided to put it together as a unit and then put out that release.
Well, I first met, I knew Strut for a long time. So I met Strut in the very early 90s when he was just a kid, really. Well, I was a kid. He was a couple of years younger than me. But I met Strut through DJ Frenzie, who was my DJ at the time. And he lived out on the east side of Melbourne, a couple stops away from where Strut lived. And I remember, I was going out to Frenzie's. We started making demos and shit like that. And his spot in the eastern suburbs became a little bit of a ground. His old man was in the Little River Band, and he had some, primitive but next level recording facility. Shit. He had like a reel-to-reel. He had a sampler. So going from what I knew, firstly with Jamie and A Mirage with their little garage setup to buying my own decks and a mixer and just starting to learn the DJ side of it, but still recording into tape decks to actually then go into understanding the actual process of recording and multi-tracking. Even though it's only 2 tracks or 4 tracks, it opened up a whole new world. It was like, so I don't need the 2 boom boxes anymore, you know what I mean? To keep bouncing, playing what I've recorded onto here, and then the quality just getting less and less and less each time I record. And so Frenzie was a bit of a hub for many of us in the Melbourne scene. And Strut was one of the guys that he had coming through from his neighbourhood or nearby. And we kind of just hit it off straight away, really. Strut was very... for a dude younger than me, he was very brash, he was very out there. I've said before, he had like dyed blonde hair and shit, and by then I'd probably started to grow my hair out a bit, but he still had like real short hair, wore the cap up high, and just a stack of attitude, which I loved, you know what I mean? I just loved that about him, that he had that attitude. And we kind of just hit it off straight away. I got given a couple of opportunities through AKA and the Straight Up label at a few gigs to jump up. And he came with us and drunk in the park, and then we'd go to the gig and I'd get Strut up with me sort of thing. And he started stealing the show, man. Like, these guys were inviting me on stage to spit a 16 and I'd bring my boy up and he was just like leaving me for dead, you know what I mean? So I loved what Strut was doing then. So we knew each other through that. And then I met Bobby Balans and Rob Natural in about, I think it was New Year's 95. No, it was before that, sorry. It was 93, I think. We were doing shit in 95. It was about 93. So probably a couple of years after I knew Strut. We kind of met up through Johnny Item, another mutual friend, a DJ. And he was sort of hanging out with these dudes he met on the north side. They were from out this side of town. And he was like, these dudes are fresh, man, you'll like them. And, I was very sort of like, I was a bit of a hater. So I kind of like, without too much to show in the way of what I'd done, I just still thought my shit was the best, you know what I mean? I didn't have fuck all to show for it apart from a few live spits, so I was pretty sort of closed-minded to new guys locally as well, apart from the guys that I already knew were kings, like AKA and Mama's Funk and Prowler and dudes like that. But he was like, nah, these dudes are dope, so we met up and, I just remember Rob Nat straight away. He was like a freestyler all the time. He just wouldn't stop rapping. And Bobby was just supremely skilled, man, and so we all hit it off early 90s. We'd all started to bond. By 93, 94, by 94, we were all pretty tight. So we started rapping together and, as along with other guys. But as the 90s sort of progressed into forming Uncut with Robbie, so Rob Nat and I started the label and worked on my album. It was a no-brainer to get all those guys in on it as far as, as guests or as family, really. So LC was already forming, really, you know what I mean? And yeah, we probably sort of made conscious decisions that we were going to become a crew by that late 90s, sort of 2000 stage sort of thing. So everyone was still going to continue doing their own shit, because Rob and Bob had a crew called the Formulators. I'd come from RFK, but I was just Trem, and Strut was a solo MC as well. So we were kind of, I mean, it was cool then to do live shows with a bit more of a crew as well, you know what I mean? So we kind of, we're all doing our solo shit, and they were doing their duo shit, and we kind of came together as a foursome ultimately. And then, so we started to plot and plan our shows that we got, as far as, not on the back of any tracks, but you know, whatever instrumentals we were rocking on, we were like starting to formulate raps together and putting this verse with that verse. So I just started to form almost as a live type scenario, but we were all mates as well. So we were still smoking and drinking and getting fucked up and partying together. And then once it sort of got to, after my second 12 and Strut dropped Authentic, it got a bit more serious, where we started to get some bigger shows. So we were like supporting the Alcoholics and shit like that. So, you know, once those gigs started to come up, it was a case of saying, all right, well, if we're going to take this to the next level, we need to come up with a name. LC was formed on the back of Bobby Balans had a track called the Lyrical Commission on Prowler's Rock the City comp, I think it was. So that was kind of, that's where it all sort of started. And then as we started doing all these live shows, dudes were like, well, you know, you guys putting anything out, you know what I mean? Like, so it just kind of, it just evolved from there. I was like, all right, well, let's do something, you know what I mean? So we kind of consciously sat down and made the idea to make an album. And yeah, we sort of set to work in end of 2001, early 2002. Started planning the stages set. So it was kind of a year in the making, I guess you'd say, from its inception to its release.
And then at which point in time did J Red come into the picture?
Word, good point. So Red was, J Red's from the southeast, and I was recording my original album, or what became the 12s, out at Prowler's, and he lived out there 5 minutes away from J Red's house. And when I was doing Amateurs, or a couple of the tracks off it, we were just talking about DJs, because I did some cuts, Prowls did some cuts, Deadly did some cuts on both my 12s. So we kind of all just, you know, we were just cutting the choruses basically. And I sort of was like, oh, you know, it'd be cool to get someone, you know, new, firstly, and someone who's just strictly a DJ on a joint or two. So he was like, there's this kid around the corner, J Red. He's dope, man, bring him in. So he came into Prowler's, and yeah, just fucking blew us away straight off the bat. It was just like, fuck. And this is 98, 99, I suppose. And yeah, so I put him on the track Amateurs. He did the cuts on that. And then he started to automatically started to do the live shows that we were doing prior to really becoming LC. He was our DJ. So I can't, because my solo shows, I usually had Prowls as my DJ. And then in that era for the 12s. And then when I dropped Amateurs, I started to take J Red as my DJ basically. And we did our first interstate show to Adelaide. We did an Amateurs tour to Adelaide. And so that was pre-Culture of Kings. And yeah, I took the whole crew. So J Red and Strut and Rob Nat and Bobby Balans all came. So that was my first trip interstate as a performer. It was cool. It was an eye opener. Great place to go. Yeah, we weren't taking it too fucking serious, I can tell you that. But I
don't think anybody was back in the days,
man. No, it was just an opportunity to go. And you mentioned, I know you mentioned Kirk, but PJ put the gig on, you know. So we went over there, you know, someone say, yeah, we've booked you a Tarago, jump in and drive it over. And we ended up crashing at Debree's house, all of us. And yeah, that was cool. That was kind of like, that was the first interstate tour. And was good fun. You know, I think we had crossbreds on the gig that night and maybe terra firma and after hours. And that was our sort of first introduction into meeting the guys from West. You know, we had decent relationships with guys in Brizzy in particular, like Lazy Grey and Hams and Lenny and dudes like that. But we hadn't sort of built too much with guys out your side of town. So that was really cool. And I don't know, man, it was good times, you know, like I said, no one really took it that serious. It was a good party. And I must admit though, on the back of that, coming back, you know, I started to, as much as we partied and got fucked up, met some great people, I started to see the seriousness of it. And this is all in that build up to forming Lyrical Commission sort of thing. And that's actually when we recorded the track with Debris and Flack for the Culture of Kings. It was on the Amateurs tour.
So what track was that on the Culture of Kings?
It's called Lyrical Mongrels.
Yeah, okay, but Bob Balans has his own solo joint on Culture Kings 1 as well?
No, he has that on Culture Kings 2.
Where the hook is like, or the intro's like, you got a problem with balance?
No, yes, yeah.
So that's Cultures 2.
That's Culture Kings 2, yeah.
The Lyrical Mongrels was Cultures 1.
Correct, yeah. So we recorded that. We recorded Lyrical Mongrels at Debris' house on the Amateurs Adelaide trip tour, call it what you will,
shit.
you know. Yeah, and that was in the real early formation of Culture of Kings where it wasn't even really formed yet. You know, I know Dimes was talking to Baz and they were kind of just talking about this, you know, as we started to amalgamate with guys interstate and they started to meet people from Melbourne and Sydney and whatever. It was a very early inception. I'm assuming that song was real early in the piece. But I think Debris and Flack had it in their head when we went over there anyway that they wanted to do a track with us, you know what I mean? Which back then it was a pretty good meeting of the minds sort of thing, you know. Because we rocked up and straight away they were, you know, Debris was playing us the loop and he's like, before you go, I want to get you in the booth, you know what I mean? So once the tour section was over, we just had a day there and we all just wrote it on the spot and yeah, it was real cool. So, but yeah, getting back to it. So that was, again, that was a real part of the formation of LC because we weren't even LC then. It was Trem and his crew, you know what I mean? Like,
so that was the first time that you guys were credited as Lyrical Commission on a record?
Yes, correct.
But
yeah.
that was technically before it was really Lyrical Commission.
Yeah. We might have been calling ourselves Lyrical Commission then. Yeah, I can't remember exactly, but the gig wasn't billed as Lyrical Commission. I don't think anyway, unless it was Trem and Lyrical Commission, but I've got a feeling it might have been Trem plus Formulators and Strut, I think. Don't quote me on that, but yeah. But J Red came as our DJ on that tour and then he continued to steal the show fucking for the next four years, I suppose, of live shows. So.
And then so, I guess why Lyrical Commission? Why did you guys go with that name?
Yeah, as I said, Bob Balans had a track called Lyrical Commission, and one of the things that I think we all identified, and I know I did, is that lyrically, even you know, keeping J Red out of the picture for a minute, I felt like the four of us couldn't be touched, or at least we were pushing, you know, skills lyrically that I wasn't seeing. I'm not saying that wasn't here, but the shit I was hearing wasn't really touching us. And we kind of, I mean, in Bobby's song, he calls himself the chairman of the Lyrical Commission, you know, and we were toying with ideas of having another track, a Lyrical Commission Part 2, where everyone came in playing their, you know, being their piece in the boardroom, so to speak, I guess, and, you know, of who they were, you know, from the chairman to the director and blah, blah, blah. And I just remember fucking around half writing a verse about being the janitor and coming in and cleaning up motherfuckers and shit. It was pretty funny. But it kind of just served as a pretty cool foundation for where we were at because it was really lyrical. And it was something that we were really focused on, not like trying it, but it just stood out that we were seemingly more lyrical. You know, some guys were maybe working on their shows better, some guys had more bounce or projection or showmanship or whatever, but when it came to the lyrics, you know, I didn't think anyone was fucking with what we were doing. So LC for short was dope as well. So that's where it basically came from. And to add on to that, the other thing, particularly when it came time to make the album, was already happening anyway, I think in our own heads. But even though this scene had started to really form locally, one of the things that subconsciously initially I was thinking, but then consciously became the reality, and even verbally made sure that we were all on the same page, was that we weren't looking at what was happening locally. So almost getting back to what you were saying before, irrespective of the growth of the scene and where guys here were at themselves, our sole focus was to be as good as Big L, or as good as Lord Finesse, or as good as OC, or as good as Nas, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we were writing and rapping to be in New York, man. You know what I mean? We weren't writing and rapping to be in Melbourne or Adelaide. It was like, I want to be able to go to New York at that time and think, well, if I had the opportunity, I could bust this 16 and these dudes aren't going to laugh me out of the fucking city. You know what I mean? And that was something that we were looking at, that I felt as the scene was growing, many dudes weren't doing. They were still looking in their own backyard a little bit more. And, you know, not to say that that's wrong, because the scene was growing and it was grabbing dudes in, but the whole time our focus was to still be world class, world quality with what we were doing, irrespective of our accent, you know what I mean? And I felt that again, being the Lyrical Commission, we were heading the board up here, you know what I mean, where everyone else was kind of down around here. So that was the science on that.
The lesson. 2-7. Oh yeah.